Hello, viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today, I'm going to be commentating over another pre-recorded match that I played against a user by the name of glaiveguy, which was played for the 5th round of the 4th season of Sam Mann's Warhammer 40k Conquest Octagon WA. Though at this point in my LCG career, I've created a tremendous number of videos and interviewed what feels like innumerable tournament champions, my personal estimated total number of matches played is still under 20. So, while I frequently talk to the experts and feel like I have significant potential, I'm still missing an underlying fundamental understanding of a great many basic elements of gameplay that would stand to make me a much more formidable and competent player. So, I definitely make more than my fair share of mistakes and suboptimal plays, and for that reason, I ask that you please leave comments for this video, constructively criticizing and making suggestions for how I could improve, because with your assistance, hopefully someday I can indeed reach the level of skill and experience required to become a truly formidable tournament player. So, if you enjoy this video and would like to see me play out and commentate more matches of my own, be sure to let me know in a comment. But in any case, let's get our video started with a match between myself as Ragnar Blackmane and glaiveguy as Commander Shadowsun. Alright, thank you very much for joining me today for yet another commentated match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. This is actually going to be the 5th round of the 4th season of Sam Mann's Warhammer 40k Conquest Octagon WA online competitive league. This match is going to be featuring none other than myself, running the likes of Ragnar Blackmane once again, and my opponent in this video is going to be glaiveguy, so a very highly respected, well-regarded community member for sure, and he is playing our Tau Warlord Commander Shadowsun. The initiative token happens to be in his hands, and we end up seeing his very first deploy action being an Earthcast Technician to planet number 3. So he's in the process of tutoring the top 6 cards of his deck for any drone or attachment card that he would like. I believe that both of us decided to stick with our opening hands. So just doing a real quick once-over of what I've got available to me, I decided to stick with this because of the 2 Blackmane Sentinels being able to potentially win command. If the Tau player would have been able to best me in command, note that the drone our Tau friend ended up drawing was the 2-icon recon drone. I can move those Blackmane Sentinels away from a planet where they're essentially doomed to lose command in order to be more useful further up the battlefield. I've got a Catachan outpost, which is going to be incredibly useful for allowing me to deal as much damage kind of wherever I can, so it's just a nice opportunity to remain flexible. I love seeing eager recruits. I was definitely kind of nonplussed, not very thrilled about Ragnar's war camp, but the presence of that rogue trader and additionally one of 2 copies of Blood Angels Veterans I thought would be just absolutely fantastic in helping me to really pressure these first few planets. We ended up seeing another Earthcast Technician put out to planet number 5, and it seems as though glaiveguy didn't actually manage to find anything with that Tau unit there, but just in trying to really push toward victory, in looking at our planet layout, we've got a victory condition as early as the first 3 planets, and as we see a Vashya Trailblazer touchdown to planet number 4, I'm trying to think to myself, how can I really be aggressive? How can I try to push this victory as quickly as possible? I chose Ragnar in the first place because he's a very competitive, very well-regarded, powerful, well-performing warlord in a competitive sense. The Space Marines aren't tremendously difficult to play in regard to what most players' opinions are of them, so that was definitely a factor I was trying to leverage in my advantage by picking Ragnar today. I wasn't sure if we'd gotten to the point in the tournament where there was going to be picking and counter-picking, like clearly I've published several videos where I was playing Ragnar, so seeing as how whichever player ends up winning in this video will make the top cut of the tournament and have a pretty significant chance at winning the entire thing, I was wondering if my opponent might pick something that's very good against Ragnar. But I ended up putting that Blood Angels Veterans to the first planet. I do my second copy of Blackmane Sentinel to planet number 5. At this point, I effectively have to pass, and of course, now that he's essentially out of cards to play, we finally see my opponent here put that limited zero-cost recon drone to planet number 5. Much to my horror, I ended up seeing a Warlock Destructor put out to planet number 1. The initiative token happens to be resting in the hands of Commander Shadowsun, and now that I've passed, I just feel very, very punished by just this just enormous excess, kind of a monsoon of Tau units suddenly swarming to the first planet. So I'm trying to think, things are starting to look bad. How can I try to be aggressive? I'm going to ultimately go to planet number 1 just because our victory condition is so soon. So Yvarn is planet number 1. Its battle ability isn't very useful. The only unit I have in my hand at the moment that I'd potentially put into play is the Eagle Recruit or the Rogue Trader. I'm playing a very high unit count deck, a very weak but command icon plentiful unit deck. Not so much to my surprise, Commander Shadowsun ends up going to planet number 2, which is Planum. Prior to seeing this Warlock Destructor and Viorla Marksman here, I was very much going to be going to Planum, so I was hoping that I could maybe win the battle at planet number 1 with or without the help of my Eagle Recruit, and then win Planum in order to shift the Blood Angels Veterans to planet number 2. Planet number 3 is going to be Eloith, which allows for the tutoring of cards effects. Planet number 4 is going to be Taurus, which rewards players for keeping a very low unit count. And then planet number 5 is going to be Ossus 4, which allows for stealing of resources. So as we can see at the moment, this is just going to start a deadly, economic string of possible victories for our opponent here. I try to use that Blackmane Sentinel trick. I definitely don't expect too much in regard to command. I'm only able to win the command struggle at the very first planet there, so the Tau player is just absolutely able to sweep command. He ends up netting a grand total of 4 cards and 4 resources relative to my single resource, and as you can already see, the economic disparity is starting to become established here, where this Tau player just has such a fantastic sweeping command presence established. I relocated that Blackmane Sentinel from planet number 5 to planet number 1 because there's no way in hell that I'm going to be able to surpass those 3 command icons sitting at planet 5 based on what's in my hand. None of our players are using any actions or anything like that. The Viorla Marksman attacks during the ranged skirmish, and he ends up putting a point of damage onto Ragnar. So that's kind of annoying because there's no Iridial to be found. I don't have an Iron Halo in my hand or anything like that, but at the moment, I'm just trying to think if I can try to press my luck, if I can try to kill off some of these units, then I could potentially, take the game, whether or not my opponent manages to develop some kind of economic stranglehold. So I've got 1 resource, I've got 4 cards, my opponent happens to have 4 resources and 6 cards. His Warlock Destructor takes a swing at me after my Blackmane Sentinel has put a couple points of damage onto his Warlock Destructor, and I'm already seeing Ragnar with a just alarming amount of damage here. So I'm wanting to try to ensure that I can kill this Warlock Destructor. My opponent has so many cards in hand, it's absolutely maddening just that I'm expecting him to have just a tremendous wealth of different shield cards, but I do manage to kill off all the different Tau units. I'm going to ultimately win the battle at the first planet. I'm not going to actually trigger Yvarn's battle ability, and that's going to be a very important one type of each planet icon. So red, green, blue, material, strong point, technology. I've managed to capture 1 of each. Commander Shadowsun is going to go entirely uncontested at planet number 2. She's going to win the battle there, and now it's going to be up to just her to do whatever she would like in regard to shifting a unit about. Quite wisely, I think Commander Shadowsun moves a unit, one of those Earthcast Technician, to planet number 1, and this is kind of starting to be a little bit frustrating because I know that I'm still going to want to try to push those early game planets, but of course my veterans, my Sentinel are going to be arriving exhausted. Commander Shadowsun can go to planet number 1, she could drop off a stealth cadre, she could affix a heavy marker drone to my Blood Angels veterans, so we see our headquarters phase come and go. We each get 4 resources, we each draw 2 cards, and the initiative token is now in my possession. I ended up getting a copy of the Drop Pod Assault, as well as an Imperial Fist Siege Force. So it's my deploy action. I've got 5 resources, 6 cards, relative to my opponent's 8 resources, 8 cards, and now I'm thinking, how can I try to dig myself out of this little bit of an economic ditch that has been established here? So I've got that Ambushing Recruit, I've got a Rogue Trader that I could well put out to planet number 5, we see Karnath, and I end up figuring as my first action, I'll end up going with my Catachan Outpost. Put that support into play. It's definitely got obvious clear combat benefits, and I was going to play the Imperial Fist's Siege Force, but I was thinking I should try to hold on to that for as long as possible, just because those Earthcast Technician happen to be allies, Rogue Traders, Void Pirates happen to be allies, and I suppose the more of those that I could potentially rout in one fell swoop, the better. But what exactly are we going to see from Shadowsun? Certainly there are a lot of cards in my hand that aren't doing me a tremendous bit of good. At this moment, I was trying to figure out where in hell can I actually try to win command so that I can play my Imperial Fist Siege Force and reliably put out my Drop Pod Assault. And of course, it's becoming less and less likely that I'll also be able to put out that Eagle Recruit. But we end up seeing a copy of the unique Fireblade Kyvray put out to planet number 1 by Commander Shadowsun, so glaiveguy now can simply use any Tau shield card at Kyvray's planets in order to add an additional icon to it. So I don't have any tremendously hard-hitting units in this deck. I've got lots of little attackers that get augmented by effects like Catachan Outpost, so that was definitely a little bit disheartening to see, and it's definitely going to be a bit of a thorn in my side. But I end up deciding that now is the moment to go ahead and put out that Imperial Fist Siege Force. Once again, I'm feeling as if I should really try to put some pressure on that first planet. Kyvray by himself isn't that big of a deal, and I want to try to prevent some sort of Tau snowball effect. So the more attachments start to interplay, the more daunting and dangerous my opponent is becoming. I happened to notice in the Skype group earlier today that glaiveguy had been talking a lot about Commander Shadowsun, so I was thinking he might opt to run Commander Shadowsun. I'd been toying around with the idea of switching to Captain Cato Sicarius in case someone would have kind of assumed that I was going Ragnar, if somebody would have gone big units heavy, just as a little bit of a meta call there, but I ended up going with tried and true Ragnar, the warlord I know best. But Pathfinder She Ores touches down on the first planet as well, and this is also going to be a little bit of a problem. It's another Tau unique. Now my opponent has 3 command icons, and any hope of winning the battle at the first planet is starting to quickly elude me, so I'm starting to think, where exactly do I need to go to try to potentially win the game? I'm starting to rethink my victory condition now that things are seeming very, very difficult, so the Pathfinder can discard attachments in order to ready it. So if he were to get a Shadowsun Stealth Cadre, he could attack for 5, then get readied, then attack for 3. So I'm trying to think, is there anything I can do with the first planet, or am I essentially going to be forced to forego it? I've only got 1 resource left, which I use immediately to put out a Rogue Trader to planet number 5, hoping that it'll eventually be able to pay for itself. If I get a card and 2 resources from it, that would be absolutely fantastic. So I'm about to pass. I've got no resources, 3 cards. My opponent uses his last 2 resources to do a gun drone affixed to Fireblade Kyvray, so now he's definitely a bit of a priority target for me. So I've got the initiative token, we're both deciding where exactly to send our warlords, and I'm starting to think I need to abandon the notion of winning through technology. That early game victory is not going to be possible. Those blue icons are ultimately going to elude me, so I'm trying to reassess. Could I do strong point? Could I do material? I'm definitely going to have to potentially go for strong point. I did not want to go to planet number 1 because I feel like I would be obliterated by Hive Ray. All my exhausted units would just be easy pickings. So I go to planet number 3. I'm hoping maybe I'll be able to trigger Taurus, start to recover some of this economic loss that I've experienced thus far. So I'm kind of readjusting my strategy, playing a little bit of a longer game here. But as you can clearly see, once again, this is a tremendous just wealth of cards and resources for my opponent. So in 2 command phases, he's gotten a grand total of 8 cards and 8 resources. He's able to quite handily trump my rogue trader at planet number 5. So Commander Shadowsun denies me of that. And now we're about to see a battle break out at planets 1, 3, and 5. So my Imperial 5th Siege Force is present at that planet. I do happen to have the initiative token, and I'm trying to think here, which of these Tau uniques do I potentially want to kill? Pathfinder is more of like a long-term thorn in my side, but that Fireblade Kyvray, his repeated shielding ability is frustrating. His augmentation ability, I end up, my opponent was courteous enough to forgive a slight mistake on my part here, but I trigger my Catachan outpost. The opponent indicates no actions. He and I were playing this game over Skype, and then I end up attacking for 4 against Fireblade Kyvray. We see a 2 shield card discarded, the Heavy Marker Drone, which was something I was worried about earlier for my Blood Angels veterans, and thanks to Kyvray's ability, that means he's only ultimately going to take a single point of damage. I take a moment to remind myself that the Marker Drones only cost a single resource, and now we see the Pathfinder end up just annihilating my Imperial 5th Siege Force, so I definitely don't want to get rid of my Drop Pod Assault, and at the moment I'm trying to think, is it worth trying this Eager Recruit to kill off that Fireblade there? My opponent happens to possess 8 cards in his hand, so I'm thinking it's probably very unlikely that I'll be able to end up killing off that unit. And at the beginning of the combat phase, something interesting to keep in mind is we did not actually see that Vashya Trailblazer relocate itself to a different planet. So glaiveguy happens to remark over Skype that he wants the Fireblade to be a bit of a hero. So what's really kind of frightening about this planet is that Planum has been won by my opponent. He ends up accruing 1 green and 1 blue icon, and now he's able to shift Fireblade Kyvray with those gun drones to planet Taurus there, and I'm not going to be able to kill him in a single swing, because as soon as my opponent has any shield card, he'll be able to negate all of my damage entirely. A 1 value card immediately becomes 2, like the Squadron redeployment becomes 2, because it's a Tau card used as shields, so Fireblade Kyvray takes no damage whatsoever, and he's essentially at this moment able, because I don't have any actions worth playing, to use this area effect volley here. So my thought process was, I really want to try to push the attack. Ragnar is not in danger of being killed quite yet, so I was wanting to deal out as much damage as possible to try to kill off these Tau units before they become too attachment heavy, and that's why I did not opt to retreat with Ragnar as my first action. I wanted to have the opportunity to retreat with Ragnar if I had to, but that's why I attacked with that Blackmane Sentinel first there. So I end up losing both of my copies of Blackmane Sentinel. I take 2 points of damage to my Blood Angels veterans, and now Ragnar has only a single hit point remaining. I was definitely wanting to keep that Drop Pod Assault in my hand, just because I was thinking that if there's anything that I can do to try to come back at this point, it's going to be a little bit of reliance on luck, because things are starting to look very, very bad indeed. It's now my opportunity to attack. Ragnar takes a swing for 2 at the Fireblade, and let's see what exactly my opponent has in regard 2 shields. So this was another kind of interesting call on my part, where I was deciding to push the offensive as opposed to actually, doing the retreat action with Ragnar. So we end up seeing a Deception discarded. It's going to be a 2 value card. We see an Even the Odds from my Tau adversary, and the gun drones immediately is relocated to the Vashya Trailblazers. So that mobile unit did not move itself away, and now it's going to have a very convenient opportunity to elicit an an area effect 2 volley. So with my hand feeling effectively forced, I end up discarding that copy of Drop Pod Assault just to spare Ragnar's life, and my thought process here was wanting to ensure that I can trigger that ability of his as many times as possible. I now take this moment to play my Eager Recruit, and I'm trying to once again just kill off opportunistically some of these Tau units before they can become too nasty. So whether my opponent ran out of shields or not, I do ultimately end up seeing that Vashya Trailblazer with associated gun drones killed, and fortunately I'm able to trigger Taurus up until my opponent plays a copy of Foretell. So Commander Shadowsun exhausts, Shadowsun draws a card, and Taurus's battle ability is denied of me. So that definitely would have gone a long way in helping to make up for some of this tremendous economic disparity that we can continue to see on the board. Obviously, my Eager Recruit's not going to be doing much in regard to winning command, and that Earthcast Technician, that Recon Drone, are just, once again, posing an enormous menace in a financial sense. So battle is going to take place at Karnath, and I decide simply all of my enemies are exhausted. I may as well just retreat my Rogue Trader, be conservative as much as I can, and the only halfway appetitive planet is going to be Eloith for Karnath's battle ability to trigger. So Eloith is going to allow my opponent to take a look at the top 3 cards of their deck, and they're going to pick whichever nasty little element is going to help their strategy come together and finish putting the nail in my coffin here. So I've forgotten to bounce Ragnar back to my HQ. I enjoy having that Rattling Deadeye. I'm thinking to myself, how can I try to balance out its command icon in potentially getting me a card and a resource, which is going to be increasingly valuable here, and it's definitely a little bit menacing or threatening with the presence of that Catachan outpost in play, but things are looking a little bit bleak for me. Unfortunately, Fireblade Kaivray and Pathfinder She Orace are still in play, but Headquarters Phase comes and goes. That's 4 resource tokens and 2 cards for both players. I end up getting a copy of Promotion. I'm definitely eyeing my Eager Recruit with that card. I've got my Rattling Deadeye, and I generously ended up drawing a Drop Pod Assault from my deck, so I've still got one more swimming around in there. I don't have a lot of great units to put into play, but the initiative token happens to be in the possession of my Tau opponent, and let's see what to expect from him. He's got 7 resources and 8 cards relative to my 4 resources and 4 cards. And just in regard to monetary value, he's definitely got way more out on the field than I do. But we end up seeing a copy of Recon Drone put out by him, and this is immediately going to shatter my hopes and dreams, because by touching down at planet number 2, it's immediately making me think that my promotion is going to be just, essentially for naught, absolutely worthless. I could maybe even, match him in command, but I'm no longer going to be able to send my Warlord to Taurus, really try to get as much, as many cards and resources out of that planet as possible. My Rogue Trader, if I can't manage to win command at that planet, it's not going to do me any good, and I'm definitely thinking he's probably going to send his Warlord to Taurus to contest me, unless I can put out some kind of crazy command presence at some other planet. So at the moment, maybe one of my biggest pitfalls is that I'm starting to think, how can I stop myself from losing the game more than how can I win the game? But maybe that's a realistic mindset to have adopted. Maybe it's a little bit pessimistic, but that's definitely my frame of mind here. So we see a Viorla Marksman put onto planet number 1. Once again, the initiative token does happen to be in the possession of my opponent, and at the present moment, it's once again my opportunity to deploy, and I can't quite recall whether or not I pass. We end up seeing a communications array put out by my opponent, so I can only imagine I have indeed passed at this point. It was certainly an option for me to use Promotion to put that onto that Rattling Deadeye or that Eager Recruit to try to win command at planet number 2. In retrospect, I'm not exactly sure why I did not opt to make that play, but my opponent puts out his communications relay, which is going to be essentially allowing him to blank any ability or cancel, nullify any ability that targets a unit with an affixed attachment. We see a Shadowsun Stealth Cadre transforming that Viorla Marksman at planet number 1 into a 3/4 ranged skirmish powerhouse. We end up seeing Davis Kingsley join our game as a spectator, and in just a few moments we'll actually see Sam Mann, the tournament creator and organizer, also join. So when you're not doing very well, it's always great to have a bit of an audience. So clearly, my only clear Warlord choice in my mind was planet number 2. I have to try and, fight for Taurus tooth and nail. I'm fully expecting Commander Shadowsun to either go to Taurus and try to just smash me there, but really all I can do is try to make the most out of a kind of bleak and desolate situation here. So things aren't looking great in regard to economy, things aren't looking great in regard to combat, and as you can clearly see, this is going to be just another fantastic round of Tau economy here. So once again, I have to say, I don't quite recall what my thought process was behind not playing the promotion. I think I maybe was just so dead set on thinking that I would not be able to win command by affixing that to my eager recruit that I forgot about that command icon associated with the Rattling Deadeye. But now there are a number of nasty different units here. The initiative token happens to be in the possession of our Tau player, so we're going to see an attachment played prior to Ragnar getting the ability to trigger his action. So let's see what exactly comes into play. My opponent has 3 cards in hand now that he puts out a Shadowsun Stealth Cadre, and now my thought process is immediately I want to try to damage that Pathfinder as much as possible so that if it were to ready and discard that Shadowsun Stealth Cadre, it would essentially just die from having accrued too much damage. So I've got the Rattling Deadeye, I've got a Catachan Outpost, the initiative token is in my opponent's hand. I end up, and this is something courteous that my opponent did. So like a fool, I was fully ready to have Ragnar Blackmane target the Pathfinder with his ability. Obviously, the communications relay would have been able to negate that ability, but thinking that the game was probably ever so slightly in his favor, my opponent was kind enough to offer me the opportunity to re-target with that ability. So, stand-up gentleman glaiveguy that I was playing against, I target instead Fireblade Kyvray, and we see a repulsor impact field shield a grand total of 3 points of damage. Not that Ragnar could have dealt that much. But our reactions are now done, and we're going to see battle taking place at the first planet here in just a moment. But, check out this ridiculous command victory. So by not even putting out that copy of promotion, now I feel doubly frustrated in hindsight because I didn't break even. I didn't win command at that planet, which I potentially could have done based on what my opponent had in hand. But he, once again, I think for the 3rd time, manages to get 4 cards and 4 resources where I get absolutely nothing. So I definitely could have stood to draw a card, generate a resource. I don't have a lot of great stuff in my hand, but for all I know, that extra card and resource could have been a drop pod assault and a resource that I was able to play it with. Who knows? Maybe that could have changed the outcome of the entire game. But planet number 1, that battle comes and goes entirely uncontested. I wasn't going to waste my drop pod assault against that 3/4 marksman, although I did think about it. I suppose if I'd have miraculously pulled an honored librarian, I could have potentially killed off those units, but I think that's a low probability event, and that planet's entirely irrelevant to my victory condition. So Eloith is captured by glaiveguy, and now he's got 2 blue technology icons. So Taurus is going to be our point of contest. I've got 3 resources, 3 cards, and glaiveguy happens to possess 7 resources and 7 cards. So I'm trying to think, this is probably the one opportunity I'll have to really punish my opponent here. I trigger my Catachan Outpost to boost up my Rattling Deadeye. My opponent indicates he has no actions, and I decide to take a swing at the Pathfinder She Orace. So I was kind of conflicted. I definitely wanted to wound it so that it can't just freely discard that attachment. I also wanted to get rid of Fireblade Kyvray because of that frustrating shielding ability. Over the course of this game, I don't know how many additional shield icons he's managed to accrue because of that unique, but I was definitely kind of trapped in regard to what my ideal target there was. So, let me know in the comments if you'd have prioritized killing the Fireblade before the Pathfinder. I just was a little bit, I suppose, between a rock and a hard place. But now it's going to be my opponent's opportunity to attack. He takes a swing with Shadowsun, which of course threatens a bloodying of Ragnar, and now I believe I know why I held on to that copy of Promotion. So whether or not that was the wise move or not, that one shield value does allow me to negate a point of damage and prevent Ragnar from being bloodied here. So I suppose I'm thankful that my opponent didn't have like an even the odds in order to move that the stealth cadre from Pathfinder to the recon drones, something like that. Ragnar takes a swing at the Fireblade because I know that his 2 points of damage isn't going to be enough to threaten removal of the Pathfinder were he to discard that attachment. So I simply allow Ragnar to take a swing at the Fireblade. Thankfully, the Fireblade did end up destroyed, and now it's going to be my opponent's turn. He attacks with his recon drone. It doesn't matter what the target is of that 0 value attack, and now it's back onto me. Do I want to drop Pod Assault? I decide yes, I do, and I'm not sure what my thinking was behind playing this drop Pod Assault prior to attacking with my Eager Recruit, but it's ultimately what I chose to do. Tactical Squad Cardenas was definitely not the thing I was most excited to see, and I kind of put these cards back at the bottom of my deck in a very haphazard manner, just because even though it's not going to influence the outcome of the game, I was trying not to let a little bit of discouragement show at this point, but I definitely could have chosen a better order for those cards. But Tactical Squad Cardenas enters play. I think I was maybe hoping for something like a Blood Angels Veterans or an Honored Librarian, just so that I could hit that Pathfinder for 3 or 4, since my opponent hadn't used a shield card on the Fireblade. But instead, that didn't happen, so the Pathfinder here is, if he chooses to, going to be able to discard that attachment and just cause a tremendous amount of trouble for me. But we see no action from my opponent, and now he allows me the opportunity to have my Eager Recruit take a swing at that Pathfinder, but we see the Command Link drone discarded, so all of that damage is blocked, and now it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for Shadowsun to recur that or any other effects. And the combat round comes to a close in regard to retreating units. I don't have the initiative, so I definitely want Ragnar to get out of there. That Rogue Trader isn't doing me any good. And then let me know if you think that my remaining units here were a good idea or not. I decided to keep all of these units just because I want to try to be able to deal out as much damage as possible while I have multiple ready units. So I know that I probably can't do much damage, but I'm thinking that I should probably try to do as much as I can when I can. So I'm not sure if I should have retreated with that Eager Recruit or not, but the Eager Recruit is destroyed. And now I'm trying to think. I was initially going to attack with my Rattling Deadeye. I'm trying to make my mind up, but I end up going with my Tactical Squad Cardenas because it's just more valuable to deal out 1 point of damage to both units. So once again, trying to make the best out of a bleak situation, trying to scrape together as many individual points of damage as I can, but my Rattling Deadeye is gone. Both of my enemies have taken 2 points of damage, and now at the present moment, the combat round comes to a close, and instead of simply allowing myself to be handily killed by the Pathfinder, I now decide to retreat my Tactical Squad. So Shadowsun bounces back to the HQ, and whether to win the game or try to prevent my opponent from winning the game, I'm now going to have to basically win Taurus, and I'll have to win Ossus 4. things are looking a little dangerous, a little bit daunting for me. I was very discouraged by my headquarters phase draw. I ended up reeling in 2 copies of Void Pirate, which aren't tremendously useful, but I'm trying to think, what can I potentially do with these? I could put them out to Planet 4 to try to win a couple resources, get a card from the Void Pirate replacing itself. I could try to pile all my units onto Planet number 1, just because the initiative token is in my hand. If I have to, I can retreat with Ragnar, but I've got that really formidable, 5/3 unit staring me down in the form of the Pathfinder. But for my deploy action, I decide, okay, I'm gonna put my Void Pirate out to Planet number 4, and to my frustration, I end up seeing a recon drone played opposite me. So my turn once again, I end up putting a copy of the Void Pirate out to Planet number 2. And I'm essentially at this point I've basically chosen to forego Taurus. So I'm thinking there's no way that I'm going to be able to win that planet. Once again, reassessing any possible victory condition for myself if I manage to, well, I suppose... At this point, I must have just gone completely, how can I try to stay alive mode, because I don't believe there's actually any victory conditions still available to me apart from Karnath and Farron. So I've passed, and my opponent is just absolutely filling the board with units here. So a Viorla Marksman with a Shadowsun Stealth Cadre attached to it, a Borkon Recruits with a Stealth Cadre attached to it, an Inquisitor Caius Roth, which... thankfully for me, doesn't actually have any effect, but just a very nasty attacker. He blocks off yet another, victory condition of mine, and now I'm just trying to think, where exactly can I send my units to try to just stay alive? So I've abandoned all notions of potentially winning at this point, but I'm trying to just play out the remainder of the match. How can I make this into the best learning experience possible? And of course, since I'm going to put this video out there, because, several hundred people are probably going to likely watch this, what could I have done differently? Is there any way that I could have potentially won this match? My opponent happens to mention after the match is concluded that his draw was very, very powerful. Perhaps I should have mulliganed mine. But, just let me know. I think at this point I took a moment to glance at my opponent's remaining cards in deck. He's drawn through something like 15 more cards than I have. I'm only able to gain 2 resources during this round here, whereas my opponent gets 2 cards and 4 resources in total. One of our spectators is actually kind enough. Sam indicates that... being focused on other things, I've forgotten that I actually happen to possess a Rogue Trader and Void Pirate at our planet number 2 here, and my opponent, I'm sure feeling very secure about the likelihood of his victory, indicates before I asked, yes, it's fine, draw a card, generate an additional resource. So thank you to Sam, and thank you once again to glaiveguy for letting me record this match, and just being, in every sense, just the undying gentleman throughout the course of this game. So planet number 1 is once again going to be entirely uncontested. It's going to be another red and green icon, if memory serves, for... my Tau opponent here, and now that puts him all the closer to victory. So if Ossus 4 ends up won by him the following round, that'll be his game. And unless I manage to win on Karnath and Farron, our soon-to-be planet 2 and 3, there's going to be absolutely nothing I can do. So I trigger my Catachan outpost on Ragnar Blackmane just to annihilate his recon drone, and there's not going to be any actions at all. I'm not actually sure if it was a suboptimal play or not to do that recon drone, but I wanted to make absolute certain that he wouldn't do something kind of cute like, shield against that damage and then do, say, and even the odds to move an attachment onto the recon drone and then potentially bloody my warlord, just because, like I mentioned before, I want that battle ability as many times as possible. So there's going to be a battle taking place at Karnath. I triggered Ossus 4's ability to steal a resource from my opponent, and now he is going to use Karnath's battle ability in order to rout one of my units. So the tactical squad is going to be routed, and since we're seeing just a ton of units starting to fill up his HQ, that's going to be a little bit of a frustrating point for me, just because Not that I'll have the initiative, but I'm not going to have the opportunity to potentially trigger that area effect when there's just a tremendous wealth of Tau units to affect with it. But the combat phase comes to an end. We go into headquarters. It's 2 cards, 4 resources for both of us, and now I'm starting to see some decent stuff here. I've got a copy of Honored Librarian and Crushing Blow. I've got 11 resources, I've got 4 cards, my opponent has 7 resources and 5 cards, and I'm just wondering, what exactly can I do? At this moment, I've just decided to be a little bit stubborn. I've decided to play this match out to the bitter end. I've essentially lost all hopes of winning. If you take a look at my opponent's HQ, you can probably not blame me for thinking like that. But we see an Earthcast Technician played by my opponent. He ends up finding a copy of Gun Drones, which I'm just thrilled to see him dig for. And for me, I've got that War Camp, I've got an Honored Librarian. I'm only counting on drawing 1 card if I happen to win command at planet number 1. So I'm trying to think, Honored Librarian and Ragnar's War Camp. That's 6 resources in total. If I were to win, 1 or 2 cards, a Drop Pod Assault, I could still have a sufficient number of resources to play that. So I just put out Ragnar's War Camp just in case it actually, happens to be for some, freak event occurs and it's useful. But, this is very much just delaying the inevitable here. But it's my opponent's turn to take a play. This is likely the very last round of the game. So what exactly are we going to see? Really, the only other thing I've got is my Honored Librarian. I've got a bunch of different units to try to keep it alive. But of course, I see that copy of Gun Drones touch down on that Earthcast Technician. My opponent happens to have the initiative token. I don't have any ranged keyword units of my own, and now things are looking very grim. So I'm going to level with you, viewers. I thought very hard about forfeiting at this moment, but I was just trying to think, maybe something crazy is going to happen. Let's just go completely nuts. I put out my Honored Librarian to planet number 1. And at this point, in all seriousness, the battle is completely lost. Just in thinking, if I'm likely to draw 1 card and 3 resources, what on earth could I draw? I could get a Drop Pod Assault, I could maybe get out of Blood Angels Veterans or something like that, some relatively formidable unit, but my opponent is going to have, his Borkon Recruits is going to be attacking for 6. Just a nightmare storm of different stuff that he's got there, but both of us are going to decide, no surprise, to send our warlords to planet number 1. The initiative token happens to be in my opponent's possession, and this is going to be just another command phase, fantastic showing for my opponent. He puts the heavy marker drone wisely onto my Honored Librarian, and that's going to be a great opportunity for that area effect too, to guarantee that he'll be able to kill the Honored Librarian. Just because if I were to, for instance, use a shield card, doubling that damage is going to essentially guarantee that my librarian is going to be killed there. And once again, I take a moment to think about how stubborn should I be. I've got an Indomitable was the card that I drew. Pretty handy. I've got a Crushing Blow. I've got 8 resources. I only need 1 of those. And my opponent has 7 resources and 5 cards going into our quite likely to be final round of combat. But he's got the initiative token. He ended up drawing 1 card, 3 resources during combat. For Ragnar's ability, I'm not sure if I forgot to trigger it or not, but it's completely in vain. Each and every Tau unit present at that planet happens to have an attachment, therefore communications relay is going to quite handily allow him to block Ragnar's ability, akin to a nullify type effect or counterspell. So, at the onset of combat, to no one's surprise, the Earthcast Technician delivers an Area Effect 2 attack targeting Ossus 4. So I select 3 of my different units to all be killed. So both my neutral units, my Honored Librarian, they're both killed. I struggle for a moment trying to figure out how exactly to bloody Ragnar. Ragnar's bloodied, he bounces back to my HQ, and now for my tactical squad, they're going to have 2 points of damage assigned to them. And I'm just trying to think. For a moment, I think about, should I use Indomitable as shields? But I decide no, I'm going to be as stubborn as possible, and I will use Crushing Blow in order to keep my tactical squad alive there. So, that's going to be basically that. I don't have any actions. I can't attack. Commander Shadowsun takes an attack of 2 at my tactical squad, and I use one of my resources to, like a stubborn fellow, play an Indomitable. So I basically block that attack. The combat round is about to come to a close, but my opponent indicates he has 1 action, so he's going to use an Even the Odds, and we end up seeing a Shadowsun Stealth Cadre shift location onto Pathfinder Shiores, and instead of giving me an opportunity to retreat, my opponent uses this opportunity to ready his now 5/3 unit, and he's going to take a quite handy, formidable swing, end up dealing out 5 points of damage to my tactical squad Cardenas. And at this point, I finally decide that my opponent has earned his victory. So, huge congratulations to glaiveguy. Up until this point in the tournament, somehow I believe I'd managed to go 3 victories and 1 loss. So he denies me from entering the top cut of the tournament, but very, very well played. Absolute stand-up gentleman over Skype. So, very well played. Congratulations once again. And of course, to all my viewers, thank you once again for watching. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Or if you are already subscribed, as ever, you're always encouraged to share this content, as the more people that end up seeing these videos, the more people might end up trying Conquest, send me a message telling me that I helped them to get into the game, and of course, once they've bought into this fantastic product, they serve only to ever expand our still growing community and send the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to release expansions and to develop this fantastic product. So, if at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, perhaps to have me record, spectate, and commentate a match of your own, I'd encourage you to contact me through Twitter or through Facebook. And of course, if at any point you'd like to help me cover some of my file hosting and operating expenses, you're always encouraged to kick me $1 or $2 on a strictly monthly basis by visiting my Patreon. But with that said, thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to provide any feedback or constructive criticism for me in the comments section below. But thank you for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.